The Grumpy Billionaire Who Lived in My Shed by Joan Savage. Chapter 1. The Man Who Rented My Shed. The day Olivia Brooks accidentally rented her grandmother's rotting backyard shed to a billionaire, she was eating cereal in her pajamas and had absolutely no idea any of it was happening. She'd listed the shed on a cottage rental app 6 months ago as a joke. Her best friend Dana had dared her to do it after their third glass of wine on a Tuesday night, and they'd laughed until Dana fell off the couch. Olivia had typed up the listing with dramatic flair. Rustic writer's retreat, solitude guaranteed, Oregon air included. She'd set the price at $400 a month, which was laughably low, uploaded one blurry photo she'd taken at dusk that made the shed look almost romantic, and forgotten about it entirely. Then, on a gray September morning, her phone buzzed. Booking confirmed. Guest, N. Hale. Duration, open-ended. Payment received. Olivia stared at the notification. Open-ended. Then she looked out her kitchen window at the shed, which was, objectively, a 15 by 12-foot structure held together by memories and stubbornness, with a lopsided door and a family of squirrels living in the eave. She typed back immediately. Hi. I think there may be a mistake. The shed isn't really a livable space, it's more of a storage situation. We have a lovely inn on Maple Street if you need. The reply came in less than 90 seconds. I'll be there Thursday. I prefer quiet. Olivia put her phone down. She picked it up again. She read the message 4 more times. He prefers quiet? She told her cat, Biscuit, who was sitting on the counter and staring at nothing with the unsettling intensity only cats could manage. He'll be here Thursday, to live in my shed. Biscuit blinked slowly. You're right, Olivia said. He'll leave after one night. It'll be fine. She was spectacularly wrong. Thursday arrived with the kind of drizzle that Oregon does better than anywhere else in the world. Soft and silver and just persistent enough to be poetic. Olivia was watching from her kitchen window when a very ordinary-looking gray pickup truck parked at the end of her driveway. The man who stepped out was not what she'd expected. She hadn't known what she'd expected. Maybe someone artsy. Maybe someone eccentric. Maybe a retired professor with elbow patches and strong opinions about semicolons. Instead, the man who climbed out of that truck was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a plain navy jacket and dark jeans. He had dark hair gone silver at the temples, a jaw that looked like it had been carved by someone who took their job very seriously, and the expression of a person who had not smiled since approximately 2019. He stood in her driveway, looked at the shed, and said nothing. Olivia grabbed her raincoat and hurried outside. Hi, you must be N. Hale. I'm Olivia Brooks. She offered her hand. I want to make sure you know what you're looking at. That's the shed. The actual shed. It's not a metaphor for something nicer. He looked at her hand, then shook it. His grip was firm and brief and professional, like he was closing a deal rather than meeting a person. Nathan, and I can see it's a shed. It has a dirt floor, she said helpfully. I know. And the roof has a creative relationship with rain, by which I mean rain comes in sometimes. I know. She waited. He picked up his bag, a single, understated duffel that looked expensive in the way only things that were trying not to look expensive could, and walked toward the shed like a man who had made peace with all his decisions. Olivia followed him. There's no electricity? I know. The door sticks. I'll manage. There's a family of squirrels. He paused, just briefly. In the shed? In the eave above the door. They're mostly harmless. I've named them, but that doesn't mean we're friends. Above the door, she paused. The mom is Linda. Something moved across his face. It might have been the beginning of a smile. It disappeared before she could be sure. Good to know, he said. He opened the lopsided door, which took 2 tries and a shoulder, ducked inside, and pulled it mostly shut behind him. Olivia stood in the drizzle, staring at the closed shed door. From inside came only silence. She walked back to her house, went to her kitchen window, looked at the shed, and said to Biscuit, "He's going to leave in the morning." Biscuit, as established, did not agree. By Friday morning, Nathan Hale had not left. He emerged from the shed at 6:15, precise as a clock, walked to the outdoor spigot on the side of Olivia's house that she'd told him he could use, splashed cold water on his face, and then stood very still in the early morning fog with a cup of coffee from a small camp thermos, staring at the garden. Olivia watched from her upstairs window with her own coffee, and a complex mixture of curiosity and guilt, and the kind of fascination that was probably rude to act on. He was still there at 6:30. The fog moved around him like it was being respectful. The crows on the fence line were unusually quiet. Even Linda the squirrel stayed still in her eave. Olivia thought, "Who is this man?" By Saturday morning, she had a more pressing question. Because on Saturday morning, there was a generator purring quietly behind the shed. There were 2 neatly stacked pallets of lumber beside it, and Nathan Hale was talking in low, measured tones on a phone call, pointing at the shed's roofline with the focused energy of someone discussing a renovation project rather than, say, a 15 by 12 storage disaster. Olivia walked outside with her coffee. "What's happening?" she asked. He lowered the phone. "Repairs," he said. "The roof needs fixing." "You're fixing my shed roof," he said. "I'd prefer not to sleep in rain." "That's fair," she said slowly. "But you should know I didn't promise any of this was—" "I'll cover costs," he said, and brought the phone back up and turned away with the serene authority of a man who had never in his life been told what to do and didn't intend to start now. Olivia stood there holding her coffee. From next door, over the fence, came a stage whisper. "Olivia." It was her neighbor Dorothy, 73 years old, 5 feet tall, and the most aggressively curious person in Cutler Creek, Oregon. Dorothy was peering over the fence with the focus of a woman who had found her purpose. "Olivia, who is that man, and why is he fixing things?" "He's my tenant." Dorothy stared. "In the shed?" "Yes." "The shed with Linda in the roof?" "The very same." Dorothy looked at Nathan, then back at Olivia, with an expression that mixed suspicion and delight in equal measure. "He's very handsome," she said. "I hadn't noticed," Olivia said. "Very handsome." "Liar," said Dorothy, and disappeared behind the fence. Olivia went back inside, sat down at her kitchen table, and Googled N. Hale entrepreneur on her phone. Nothing specific came up. There were dozens of Nathan Hales in America. She scrolled for a few minutes, found nothing illuminating, and decided it didn't matter. She was wrong about that too, but she wouldn't find out for a while yet. That night, lying in bed listening to the soft Oregon rain and the distant sound of someone working quietly in a shed at the edge of her yard, Olivia had the strangest feeling that something was beginning. She couldn't have said what. She couldn't have said why. But the feeling stayed with her all night, warm and inexplicable, like a light someone had left on. Chapter 2. The Impossible Tenant. By the end of the first week, Olivia had established several facts about her mysterious shed tenant. Fact 1. He was up before dawn every single morning without exception. Fact 2. He spoke approximately 40 words per day, total, distributed very carefully across whatever conversations were strictly necessary. Fact 3. He paid for things in cash, not in a suspicious way, in a very quiet, very deliberate way that suggested he had simply decided he was done with the digital world and meant it. Fact 4. He was doing something extraordinary to the shed. Olivia discovered this on day 6 when she walked out with a plate of banana bread. She'd made too much, she told herself, which was technically true. And Nathan opened the shed door before she could knock. She looked past him. She blinked. She looked at him. She looked past him again. "What?" she said. "Happened in here?" The dirt floor was gone. In its place was wide plank wooden flooring the color of warm honey, laid with a precision that suggested professional skill or obsessive attention to detail, probably both. The walls had been insulated and paneled in white-painted shiplap. Against the back wall sat a built-in bench seat with storage underneath and cushions in a deep forest green. A small wood stove. She had absolutely no idea how he'd gotten a wood stove in here. She'd been at work. Sat in the corner, its small chimney disappearing through a neatly patched section of roof. A lofted sleeping area had been built above the bench, accessible by 3 wooden rungs, with a privacy curtain in soft gray linen. The generator's power ran to 2 wall outlets and a strip of warm Edison bulb lights strung along the peak of the ceiling. The whole space smelled like fresh wood and coffee, and something faintly piney that she couldn't name. "You built all of this?" she said. "Mostly. Some pieces were delivered." "In 6 days." "I don't sleep much." She turned to look at him. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, watching her with that steady, dark gaze that gave away precisely nothing. He was wearing a flannel shirt, and there was a faint smudge of sawdust on his jaw, and Olivia had a sudden, irrational thought that he was the most infuriating and fascinating person she'd ever encountered. "This is a better living space than my college apartment," she said. "That's a low bar." "It is," she agreed. She held out the banana bread. "I made too much." He looked at the plate. "Thank you," he said, and took it with the careful solemnity of a man accepting something rare. She walked back to the house feeling oddly warm. The banana bread, she learned later from Dorothy, who had developed a complicated system for observing the shed from her upstairs guest room window with a pair of birdwatching binoculars, was eaten in its entirety before noon. "He ate all of it," Dorothy reported over the fence the next morning, breathless with delight. "Every slice. I saw him. He looked very serious while he was eating it, like he was solving a problem." "Dorothy," Olivia said carefully, "are you surveilling my tenant?" "I'm birdwatching." "Through the fence. There are some very interesting birds in your yard. There are 3 crows and Linda the squirrel. Linda has shown unusual patterns of behavior lately," Dorothy said with great dignity, and went back inside. That same week, Olivia's other neighbor, Roy Ellison, appeared at her front door with a casserole dish and a suspiciously casual expression. Roy was 61, recently retired from the post office, and had the energy of a man who had simply replaced the structure of work with the structure of neighborhood observation. "Heard you've got a fella staying out back," he said. "I have a tenant," Olivia said. "In the shed." "In the shed?" Roy looked past her shoulder, despite the fact that the shed was behind the house and entirely invisible from her front door. "What's he like?" "Quiet." "Doing anything back there?" "Renovating." Roy's eyebrows rose. "By himself?" "Apparently." Roy processed this. "He handy?" "Extremely." "Huh." Roy handed her the casserole with a meaningful look. "Well, this is a chicken and rice thing. You can share it if you want, with your tenant." He said the last word like it might be a euphemism for something. "Or not. Up to you." Olivia took the casserole. "Thanks, Roy." "He single?" Roy asked. "I have no idea." "Just asking," Roy said, and sauntered back to his house with the contentment of a man who had gathered significant intelligence. Olivia stood on her porch and looked at the casserole and the banana bread and the plate of cookies Dana had dropped off after hearing about the shed situation, and thought that small towns were both the most wonderful and most exhausting ecosystems in human civilization. She knocked on the shed door at dinner time. Nathan opened it and looked at the casserole. "Roy brought it," she said. "My neighbor. You'll meet him eventually, and I want to warn you that he's going to ask you things, and you should be prepared." "Things," Nathan said. "Personal things, small-town things, things like where you're from and what you do and whether you're single." A muscle in his jaw shifted. "I'll manage." "I thought you might want to eat on the porch," she said, surprising herself. "I have a table out there. It's getting that nice time of evening." She looked at the sky. It was doing the thing it did in Oregon in September, going gold and amber at the edges with that particular quality of light that made everything look like a painting. "But if you'd rather eat in the shed, that's completely fine." He looked at her for a long moment. "The porch is fine," he said. They ate Roy's chicken and rice on Olivia's back porch as the light turned gold, and the crows went quiet, and Linda watched them from the roof of the shed with an expression of mild judgment. Olivia talked because she talked when she was nervous, and she covered topics including the third graders she taught, who had collectively decided that the word moist was the funniest thing humanity had produced, the farmers' market that ran on Saturdays in the town square, and the specific cultural customs of Cutler Creek, Oregon, which had a population of 4,000 and an opinion for every one of them. Nathan ate and listened. He didn't offer much, but he didn't seem to want her to stop either. At one point she asked, without planning to, "Why a shed?" He was quiet for a moment. "I needed something small," he said. "Small like square footage? Or small like small?" He looked at her with something complicated moving behind his eyes. "Both," he said. She nodded and didn't push. But when they were done, he carried both plates inside to her kitchen and washed them without being asked, and left them upside down in the drying rack with the neat efficiency of someone who took even small domestic tasks seriously, and went back to his shed. Olivia stood in her kitchen looking at the clean plates. "He washed the dishes," she told Biscuit. Biscuit was not impressed, but Olivia was, more than she should have been. Much more than was probably wise. Chapter 3. A Tiny Home Miracle. The solar panels appeared on a Tuesday. Olivia came home from school to find a truck in her driveway from a Portland solar company, 2 installers on the shed roof, and Nathan on the ground below them, directing operations with the focused calm of a general who happened to be wearing a flannel shirt. "Nathan," she said slowly, "those are solar panels." "Yes. On my shed. They'll reduce reliance on the generator, and I'll wire them so the excess feeds your house." She stopped. "My house? Your electric bill will go down, significantly." She stared at him. "How significantly?" "Depending on the season, you may not have a bill at all." Olivia looked at the solar panels, then at Nathan, then at the shed, which had by this point been so dramatically transformed from the inside that she'd started thinking of it less as a shed and more as a small architectural achievement. "Nathan," she said carefully, "this is a lot of investment for a month-to-month rental." He met her eyes. "I'm planning to stay a while." She held his gaze. He didn't look away. "Okay," she said finally, "but I want it on the record that I asked the question." "Noted," he said, and turned back to the installers. The solar panels were not the last of it. Over the next 2 weeks, a small covered porch appeared at the shed's entrance. Timber frame, shake roof, a pair of simple wooden chairs that looked handmade. A gravel path was laid from the shed to the yard's edge. Raised garden beds materialized along the south fence line, built from cedar boards, filled with rich dark soil, and planted with kale, chard, and winter herbs. Dorothy, by this point, had abandoned all pretense of birdwatching and was simply leaning over the fence with her arms folded, watching openly. "He planted fennel," she said reverently. "Who plants fennel? A man of character, that's who." "It's a garden, Dorothy." "It's an act of commitment, Olivia. Men who plant things are staying put." Roy had taken to coming over in the evenings on the pretext of walking his dog, who was a 14-year-old beagle named Gerald, who had no interest in walking anywhere and was mostly just carried and standing near the fence line making conversation in Nathan's general direction in hopes of being included. Nathan, to his credit, had started nodding at Roy. This was significant progress. The town was fizzing with curiosity. Was Cutler Creek's unofficial information network, which operated primarily through Patty, who ran the diner, Carl, who ran the hardware store, and Dana, who was Olivia's best friend and therefore considered herself an insider source, had generated several competing theories about Nathan's identity and purpose. Theory 1, from Patty. He was a burned-out tech guy from Portland escaping a complicated divorce. Theory 2, from Carl. He was a writer working on a novel and needed isolation. Theory 3, from Dana, who had done the most research. He was someone important who didn't want to be found. "His hands are too soft for someone who works with them," Dana told Olivia over coffee at the diner on a Wednesday morning. "I saw him at the hardware store getting plumbing supplies, and his hands are like, maintained, Liv. Not laborer hands. Maintained." "People moisturize, Dana." "Not like that. And he drives a truck that costs $40,000 and acts like it's nothing." That. Olivia looked up from her coffee. "How do you know what his truck costs?" Dana gave her a look. "I Googled the model, Liv. I'm a professional." "You're a librarian." "A professional researcher. Same thing." Olivia sipped her coffee. "He's private," she said. "I'm respecting that." "You like him?" Dana said. "He's my tenant." "You make him banana bread." "I make everyone banana bread." "You made him banana bread twice." Olivia put her coffee down. "Dana." "I'm just saying. He's complicated and guarded, and I don't know anything about him, and he's living in my backyard shed, which is not a normal romantic situation." Dana tilted her head. "And yet." "Dana." "And yet," Dana repeated pleasantly and signaled Patty for more coffee. The Saturday farmers' market came around, and Olivia, who never missed it, was pulling on her jacket to leave when she heard a knock at her back door. She opened it to find Nathan standing on her porch with his hands in his jacket pockets and an expression she'd learned to read as his version of uncertainty. "The market," he said. "In town." "The farmers' market, yes. I'm heading there now." "Mind if I come?" She kept her face very neutral. "Of course not," she said. They walked the 6 blocks to the town square together in the thin morning sunshine. Nathan walked with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders slightly set, like someone bracing for something. Olivia pointed out things as they went. The library where Dana worked, the old movie theater that showed films on Friday nights, the bakery that made the unreasonable cinnamon rolls. "Population 4,000, she said. "Everybody knows everybody, and everybody," she added, "is going to notice us walking together." He glanced at her. "Does that bother you?" "No," she said, surprised to find it was true. "Does it bother you?" He thought about this with the gravity he brought to everything. "No," he said finally. The farmer's market was in its autumn glory. Pumpkins and late tomatoes and apple cider and honey and wool things and the Smith family's famous hand pies. Olivia moved through it with the ease of someone deeply at home, stopping to chat, sampling things, introducing Nathan with a simple, "This is Nathan, he's renting my shed," which she'd decided was both completely true and beautifully deflating of speculation. Nathan moved quietly at her side, observing everything with the careful attention he brought to every environment. He bought a jar of honey from old Mr. Abernathy and examined it in the light like it was a thing of genuine beauty. He stopped for a long time at a stall selling hand-thrown pottery and had a quiet, substantive conversation with the potter about the clay she sourced from a local riverbed. He bought a small ceramic mug, dark blue glaze, slightly irregular, unmistakably handmade, and carried it the whole way home with both hands like it mattered. Olivia found this almost unbearably endearing. "You've been to a lot of farmers' markets," she said on the walk back. "No," he said. "I haven't." She looked at him. "You seemed so at ease there." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been to a lot of places where things are performed," he said carefully. "This was just people selling what they made. It was different." She thought about that. "What kind of places did you go before?" He looked straight ahead. "Loud ones," he said. She nodded and let him keep his quiet. But that night, sitting on her porch with her tea while the dark deepened and the lights in the shed shed their small golden glow through the window, she thought about what a person must have been through to find a small-town farmer's market a revelation. And she thought that whatever Nathan Hale was running from, it was very large. Chapter 4. The Grump Next Door. October arrived in Oregon the way it always did, like a stage manager who knew exactly what they were doing, flipping all the trees to red and amber, pulling the temperature down just enough to make everything feel like a cozy sweater that fit perfectly, and installing a permanent low golden light that made even the most ordinary things look somehow meaningful. Olivia loved October with a ferocity she never quite bothered to moderate. Nathan appeared to be cautiously, guardedly, secretly in agreement. She caught him one morning stopped dead in the middle of the gravel path with his coffee, staring up at the maple tree that stood at the back corner of the yard, which had turned an outrageous shade of scarlet overnight. He stood there for a full 3 minutes. She watched from the kitchen window with her own coffee, not wanting to interrupt something that seemed important. He went back to the shed without picking up a single leaf, but the expression on his face, which she'd become better at reading than she should probably admit, was one of uncomplicated wonder. This was the same man who, 2 days later, let Dorothy ask him 4 questions over the fence in a row without any visible irritation. Dorothy had started with the weather, moved through gardening, circled into light personal inquiry, and landed on, "And are you enjoying our town?" Nathan had said, "Yes," and Dorothy had nearly fainted with satisfaction. "He said yes," she reported to Olivia as if delivering breaking news. "Full word, 1 syllable, complete affirmative." "Groundbreaking," Olivia said. "He's warming up, Olivia. Mark my words." The warming up was real, though he'd hate to know anyone had noticed. He'd started leaving the shed door open in the mornings. He'd accepted a second casserole from Roy without the mild alarm that had attended the first. He'd taken to spending evenings on the small shed porch in one of the wooden chairs, reading by the light that fell through the porch overhang. And Olivia, on her own porch, had developed what she was almost certain was a completely normal habit of also sitting outside at those times for completely unrelated reasons. They didn't always talk. Sometimes they just existed in the same quiet yard, reading or thinking or watching the stars come out through the Oregon clouds. It was, Olivia thought, one of the most restful things she'd done in years. "You're cohabitating," Dana said. "We're not cohabitating. He lives in the shed." "You sit outside at the same time every evening?" "We both like the evening air." "You made him soup yesterday." "It was cold, and I had extra soup." "Olivia." Dana looked at her across the library's reference desk with the patient, penetrating gaze of a professional information processor. I say this with love. You are absolutely gone on this man. He's guarded and uncommunicative, and I know nothing about his actual life. And yet, Dana said, you're obsessed with saying that. It keeps being true. It was, if Olivia was being honest with herself in the private dark hours of the night, at least partially true. There was something about Nathan that pulled at her attention in a way she couldn't quite account for. He was not charming. He was not warm in any obvious way. He did not make small talk, or offer compliments, or do any of the things that most people did to be liked. But he showed up, quietly and consistently and without drama. He noticed things, small things, the way the garden was coming along, that she'd been up late the night before because her light was on, that she looked tired on Mondays when the week felt too big. One Monday, when she came home from a particularly challenging day involving a class meltdown over a misunderstanding about whose turn it was on the classroom hamster wheel, she found a mug on her porch steps. It was the dark blue handmade one from the pottery stall at the farmer's market, which she'd admired out loud and forgotten about. It was full of hot coffee, covered with a small square of cloth to keep it warm, and weighted down with a note that said simply, "Hard day?" She stood on her porch steps, holding that mug of coffee in the October air, and felt something large and inconvenient happen in her chest. She knocked on the shed door. Nathan answered. He'd been sanding something, apparently, because there was sawdust on his forearms. "You gave me your mug," she said. "I have another one." "That's not the point." He leaned against the doorframe. "What is the point?" She didn't quite have an answer for that. "How did you know I had a hard day?" "Your car was parked slightly crooked," he said. "You only do that when you're rattled." She stared at him. "You've been noticing how I park my car?" "I notice things," he said, as if this were simply a neutral fact about his nature. "Most people would consider that alarming." Something crossed his face that was close to amusement. "Most people," he agreed. She looked at him for a moment. The evening light was doing something unreasonable to the silver in his hair. "You're very odd, Nathan Hale." "I know," he said. "I think I might like that," she said, before she could decide not to. He was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, he said, "I think I might be becoming accustomed to that." She walked back to her porch. She drank the coffee. She sat in the golden October evening and listened to Nathan go back to his sanding, and felt the warm, impossible weight of something growing that she wasn't sure she was ready to name. Roy appeared at the fence. "Nice mug," he said. "Go home, Roy," Olivia said kindly. Gerald needed a walk. Gerald was, as previously established, being carried. "Good night, Roy," Olivia said. Roy retreated, only slightly disappointed. Chapter 5. Coffee and Confessions. The Saturday it rained so hard that the farmer's market was canceled was the Saturday. Olivia learned something real about Nathan Hale. It wasn't raining when she got up. It was doing that low gray sky thing that could mean anything in Oregon. So she made a full pot of coffee and brought 2 cups to the back porch, because she'd started doing that without quite deciding to, and knocked on the shed door. Nathan came out, saw the rain arriving in a dark wall from the western hills, and then looked at the 2 cups. "No market today," she said. "No," he agreed. They sat on the porch as the rain arrived with real conviction. It drummed on the porch roof and turned the garden into a moving, shining thing, and filled the yard with that specific rich smell of wet October earth that Olivia had loved her whole life. For a while, they just sat with it. Then she said, because the rain made her philosophical, "Tell me something true about yourself. You can pick what?" He looked at her sideways. "Why?" Because you've been here 6 weeks, and I've told you approximately 400 things about myself, and you've told me your first name and that you prefer quiet. That's 2 things. Nathan. He looked out at the rain. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might simply deflect, and she was preparing to accept that. But then he said, I built my first company when I was 22, in my apartment. I slept 4 hours a night for 3 years. By the time I was 30, I had 40 employees. By 35, I had 400. She kept very still. I was good at it, he said. That's not pride, just a fact. I was good at it. I understood systems. I understood what people needed before they knew they needed it. And for a long time that was... He paused, turning the coffee cup in his hands. Enough. It was the whole thing. The company was the whole thing. What kind of company? She asked carefully. Software, he said, which was true and incomplete. Communication systems. And then? He looked at the rain. And then I sold it, earlier this year. Why? He was quiet again. Because I woke up one morning at 4 a.m. in a hotel room in a city I had to check my phone to identify. And I realized I could not remember the last time I had done a single thing that was just mine. Not strategic, not public, not watched. He stopped. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been in a room where nobody wanted something from me. Olivia was quiet. She thought about the first morning, the fog, the way he'd stood with his coffee and not moved. So, you rented a shed, she said. Something happened in his expression. The careful architecture of it softened, just slightly. So, I rented a shed, he agreed. The listing said, Quiet Writer's Retreat. It wasn't wrong. Nathan, it was extremely wrong. There was a squirrel in the roof. There still is. Her name is Linda. I know. And this time, the smile came through, fully for the first time. Brief and a little rusty from disuse, but genuine. It changed his whole face, opened it up, made him look like someone who had once known how to do this and was remembering. Olivia felt it like a small earthquake. The shed is good, he said, more quietly. It's the first place in years that's felt like mine. Because it's literally a shed that you built yourself. Yes. She looked at him. Don't you have houses? I have properties, he said, and the word had a flavor she recognized as distaste. What's the difference? He looked at her and said, with complete simplicity, nobody in them. The rain intensified. Linda made a noise in the shed eave that might have been commentary. Biscuit appeared at the back door window and pressed his face against the glass with the flat-eyed inscrutability of a sphinx. I'm sorry, Olivia said, that you were lonely in all of that. He glanced at her with something startled moving behind his eyes, like she'd touched something he hadn't expected to have touched. It wasn't, he started. You don't have to explain it, she said. I'm just saying, I think it counts as lonely, even if it was also successful and impressive and all the other things. He looked back at the rain. Yes, he said, very quietly. It counts. They sat with that for a while. Then she said, for the record, you're in a room right now where nobody wants anything from you. He turned to look at her. His eyes were very dark and very still. Except maybe to share your coffee, she added, because I forgot to bring the pot out and mine's almost empty. He handed her his cup. She drank from it without thinking about it and handed it back, and they watched the rain in the comfortable silence of people who have exchanged something real and don't need to do anything with it yet. When she went back inside, she sat at her kitchen table and thought about 400 employees and hotel rooms in unknown cities and the way he'd said nobody in them. She thought about how people could have enormous lives that contained almost nothing. She thought about the blue mug and the garden beds, and the way he looked at a handmade thing like it was the most significant object in the room. She thought, oh, this is a problem. Not because it was bad, because it was the opposite. Chapter 6. The Secret Billionaire. The revelation came from Dana. Because of course it did. It was the second Saturday in October. Olivia was at the library returning books when Dana grabbed her arm with the specific grip of someone who had information and had been waiting all morning. Her arm. Come in the back, Dana said. Dana. Now, Olivia, with urgency. Dana's office was a small room lined with books and stacked with the organized chaos of someone who knew where everything was, even if nobody else did. She sat Olivia down, opened her laptop, turned it around, and said, Tell me if that's your shed, man. On the screen was a Forbes magazine profile from 18 months ago. The headline read, Nathan Hale, the quiet architect of the world's most used communication platform. Below it was a photograph. The man in the photograph was wearing a tailored suit in a glass-walled boardroom. His hair was shorter. He was not smiling. He looked somehow both completely familiar and like a person from a different universe. But it was unmistakably him. Olivia read the article with the slow, careful attention of someone who needed to understand every sentence before moving to the next one. Nathan Hale, 40, founder and former CEO of Hale Systems. Hale. Platform reach, 400 million users across 37 countries. Company sold 8 months ago for $4.6 billion. Famously private. No social media. No public statements since the sale. Whereabouts? Unknown. She read it again. Then she sat back. 4.6 billion, she said. Billion with a B, Dana confirmed, watching her face very carefully. He's living in my shed. He's living in your shed. Olivia stood up, sat down, stood up again. He renovated it himself. With $4.6 billion available to him, yes. He bought a handmade pottery mug at the farmer's market. Presumably, this is not the most surprising part of this situation. Dana, he washed my casserole dishes. Olivia, focus. She focused. She looked at the photograph again. The boardroom, the suit, the expression that was the same expression she saw every morning when he came out of the shed with his coffee. Watchful, contained, giving nothing away unless he chose to. He didn't tell me, she said. No, Dana agreed carefully. He's been here 2 months and he didn't tell me. He probably didn't want me to know, Olivia said. And that was true. She understood it was true. She understood the reason for it in her bones. Because she'd sat on that rainy porch with him and heard him say nobody wanted anything from me and understood exactly what it was he was hiding from. But, she looked at Dana. I need to think about this. Of course. Before I talk to him. Absolutely. She walked home through the October streets thinking. By the time she reached her front yard, she had arrived at a position. It wasn't simple. Nothing about this situation was simple. But she was an elementary school teacher from a small Oregon town who had spent her whole life operating on the basic principle that people deserved the benefit of the doubt and that the reasons behind decisions usually mattered more than the decisions themselves. And that he had rented a shed because he needed to disappear. He had stayed because the shed, the tiny, rebuilt, beautiful, ridiculous shed, had given him something he hadn't had in a long time. He hadn't told her who he was because the moment she knew, everything would change. She would look at him differently. She might not be able to help it. He knew that. She knew it too, now. She went to the back porch. Nathan was in the garden, turning the soil in one of the raised beds, preparing it for winter. He had his back to her. He was just a man in a flannel shirt in an October garden, turning the earth with a fork, and the afternoon light was falling across the yard, and the trees were red and gold, and the whole thing looked like something you'd hang on a wall. She sat on the porch step. He turned and saw her and straightened up, reading her face with those two perceptive eyes. "You know?" he said. "I know," she said. He drove the fork into the soil and stood with his hands on the handle. She said. He didn't offer explanations or deflections. "I wasn't trying to deceive you," he said at last. "I know that too. I know what you needed, Nathan." She looked at him. "I read the article. $4.6 billion, and you're living in my backyard turning over my winter garden." He was very still. "Does it change things?" She thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet," she said. "It might change how I feel nervous. Like maybe I should be more formal with you, or—" She paused. "No, actually that's not true. You are the same person who washed Roy's casserole dish and bought the handmade mug and told me you couldn't remember the last time you were in a room where nobody wanted anything from you." He looked at her carefully. "What I'm saying," she said, "is that I'm not going to treat you differently. But I would like it if we were done with the part where you don't tell me things." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's fair. And I want you to know," she said, "that regardless of who you are or how much money you have, the rent for this shed remains $400 a month." He stared at her. "That's actually offensive," he said. "Take it up with management," she said, and she went inside. She made it all the way to the kitchen before she leaned against the counter and let out the breath she'd been holding and admitted to herself that she was in significantly more trouble than she'd thought. Chapter 7. When the cameras arrived. The journalist arrived on a Tuesday, which was deeply unfair because Tuesday was Olivia's best day. Manageable class schedule, farmer's market prep, the particular satisfaction of a week not yet derailed. She was at school when it happened. Nathan texted her. He'd acquired her number sometime in the past month with characteristic quiet efficiency, and the text said only, "Someone with a camera just drove past the house twice." She texted back, "Media?" 3 seconds. "Possibly. I'm inside." She told her class to open their reading books and stepped into the hallway and called Dana, who picked up on the first ring. "There's a photographer at my house," she said. "Already?" Dana said. "What do you mean already?" "I may have mentioned the shed situation to one person at the regional library conference last weekend, and that person may have—" "Dana. I didn't say his name. I just said I had a friend with a mysterious shed tenant who might be someone notable, and I thought maybe—" "Olivia, I'm so sorry. I didn't think—" Olivia hung up and texted Nathan. "I'm so sorry. My best friend may have inadvertently—" "It's okay," he texted back. "It's not. It was going to happen eventually." She went back to her class. She taught fractions with a focus that was slightly more intense than usual. She drove home in record time. There were 2 cars she didn't recognize on the street outside her house. One had a camera equipment bag visible through the back window. As she pulled into her driveway, a woman she didn't know appeared from near the front walk with a professional camera and an expression of determined friendliness. "Excuse me, are you Olivia Brooks? I'm Jordan Walsh. I write for—" "Not today," Olivia said pleasantly, and walked inside and locked her front door. She went through to the kitchen. Nathan was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of her coffee, which was so unusual, he'd never come inside without specific invitation, that she stopped walking. "You came inside," she said. The shed is too visible from the street, he said. I hope that's... Of course it's fine, she said. He looked, for the first time since she'd known him, slightly off balance. Not panicked. She couldn't imagine Nathan Hale panicking. But the careful self-containment had a new tension in it, like a structure under unexpected load. How many? She asked, putting her bag down. 2 when I came in, possibly more by now. She went to the front window, keeping back from the glass. 2 people, 1 camera, 1 phone, watching the house with the patient dedication of people who were comfortable waiting. This has happened to you before, she said. The sale generated significant coverage, he said. For a while it was very... He paused. Present. She turned back to him. He looked like a person who had worked very hard to build something quiet and was watching it get found. Okay, she said. You'll stay inside tonight. Tomorrow I have a plan. He looked at her with an expression she'd come to love, that particular blend of reserve and something warmer underneath. A plan? I'm a teacher. I always have a plan. It involves Dorothy. He waited. Dorothy has been wanting to be involved in your life since approximately the first week you moved in. We're going to use that to be involved. She's also on the town festival committee, and the festival is Saturday, and half the town is going to be in the square, which means if I'm visible at the festival, openly, I'm just a local person at a local event. A local person who lives in a shed, she corrected, which is interesting but not particularly scandalous. The story is boring if you're just here. The story only gets exciting if you're hiding. He looked at her for a long moment. You're quite good at this. 4th grade curriculum includes a unit on conflict resolution, she said. You'd be amazed what transfers. He was quiet. Then, you don't have to do this. I know. This is my situation. Nathan. She sat down across from him at the kitchen table. You planted fennel in my garden. You wired solar panels to my house. You brought me coffee when I had a bad day. I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to help. He looked at her hands on the table. Then he looked up. Thank you, he said, with a sincerity that had no performance in it. You're welcome, she said. Outside, the September light was fading into a dark blue dusk, and the cameras were still there, patient and waiting. But inside the kitchen, it was warm, and the coffee was hot, and Biscuit walked in with his tail up and jumped onto the chair beside Nathan without invitation, and settled there like a small, furry vote of confidence. Nathan looked at the cat. The cat looked at him. He never does that, Olivia said. Said Nathan, and very carefully, tentatively, put one hand down near the cat, and Biscuit pressed his head against it with immediate, decisive commitment. And Nathan Hale, Billionaire, billion-dollar company founder, the quiet architect of the world's most used communication platform, sat at a small kitchen table in a small Oregon town and let a cat determine he was acceptable. It was, in Olivia's estimation, the most important thing that had ever happened in her kitchen. Chapter 8. Losing the Quiet Life. The festival plan worked. Mostly. Dorothy, informed of the situation at 7 a.m. on Wednesday over the fence, with a speed and delight that suggested she had been waiting for exactly this kind of mission her entire life, mobilized the town with the efficiency of a small but very motivated army. By noon, every person in Cutler Creek's unofficial information network, which was to say, every person in Cutler Creek, had been advised that Nathan was a quiet private person and a valued member of the community who deserved to be left alone. We protect our own, Dorothy told Olivia, with the gravity of someone issuing a declaration. He's been here 2 months, Olivia said. He planted fennel, Dorothy said, as if this concluded the matter. The journalists, there were 4 of them by Wednesday, including a crew with a small video camera who drove up from Eugene, found themselves in a town that was uniformly, pleasantly, immovably unhelpful. People at the diner hadn't seen anyone particularly notable. People at the hardware store weren't sure who they meant. Roy, when approached outside his house, delivered an 8-minute digression on the history of Cutler Creek's original settler families that caused the journalist to eventually back away slowly. But the story was out. It wasn't front-page news, but it was online. A photo someone had taken from down the street, blurry and inconclusive, captioned, "Nathan Hale of Hale Systems spotted in small Oregon town." The comments were a mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and the particular energy of people who found the idea of a billionaire living in a shed both hilarious and compelling. "The internet thinks it's funny," Dana told Olivia, showing her the thread. "It is kind of funny," Olivia admitted. "The top comment is, 'Maybe he's in the shed planning his next billion,'" Dana said. The second comment is, "Or maybe he's just a man who needed to touch some grass." Olivia thought the second commenter understood the situation perfectly. By Thursday, though, the noise was affecting Nathan in ways she could see, but he would never say. He was still up before dawn, still precise, still composed. But there was a tension he was carrying that hadn't been there before. He spent more time inside the shed. He stopped the evening porch sessions. She missed them. She hadn't realized how completely she'd incorporated them into her sense of what a day was supposed to feel like until they were gone. On Thursday evening, she knocked on the shed door. He opened it. He looked like someone doing okay in the exact particular way that meant not okay. "Come out on the porch," she said. "Both porches, yours and mine. It's a clear night." "Olivia? 5 minutes, 10, whatever you want. I'll be on my porch." She went to her porch. She sat. She waited. After 4 minutes, she heard the shed door open and the sound of him settling into the wooden chair on his small shed porch. They couldn't see each other exactly. The angle was wrong. But they could hear each other in the quiet night. "Are you going to leave?" she asked, a pause. "I don't know," he said. The honesty of that landed hard. "Do you want to?" Longer pause. "No." "Okay," she said. "Then we figure it out. It's not that simple. Most things aren't." He was quiet. An owl called from somewhere in the maples. The stars were very clear. "I've done this before," he said. "Found somewhere to be, for a little while, and then it becomes—" He searched for the word. "Known. And the thing that made it what it was stops being true." "What made this what it is?" she asked. Silence. "Nathan." Quietly, barely above the sound of the night. "You know what it is." She held very still on her porch. "Say it," she said. He didn't answer for so long that the owl called twice more, and a cloud moved across, and the temperature dropped a degree. Then he said, "I haven't wanted to stay somewhere this much in a long time." She closed her eyes. She opened them. The night was right there, huge and starlit, and full of the smell of October earth. "Then stay," she said. "It's not—" "Nathan, I know it's complicated. I know there are cameras and a story and 100 things you'd need to figure out. I know this isn't simple." She stopped. "But this, all of this, the shed, the garden, the porch, the evenings, this is real. What's happening here is real, and you don't have to run from things that are real." Silence, long and genuine, and waited. "I'm not sure I know how to do this," he said finally. "Any of this? The staying? The—" He seemed to gather himself. "The being known, by someone. The actual thing. Not the profile, not the company. Just Nathan," she said. "Yes." She sat with that. The owl was quiet. The stars stayed exactly where they were, dependable, and enormous. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you're doing pretty well at it." A long pause. Then, very quietly, something that might have been a soft laugh. Not the rusty almost smile, but something genuine and low. From the direction of the shed porch. It was the best sound she'd heard in months. The festival was Saturday. Saturday was 2 days away. She went to bed that night with the strange, bright feeling of something that had almost broken and hadn't, and lay in the dark, listening to the quiet of the house and the yard, and thought, "Please, just let this be okay." Chapter 9. Choosing What Matters. The Cutler Creek Harvest Festival was, in Roy Ellison's authoritative opinion, the best 2 days of the year. There were apple cider donuts and pumpkin carving, and a pie competition that had generated genuine community drama for 11 consecutive years. There was a bluegrass band on Friday evening and a children's parade on Saturday morning, and this year, a slightly unusual energy as approximately 40% of the attendees were keeping a peripheral eye out for a certain handsome man from a certain backyard shed. Nathan came to the festival on Saturday morning, wearing a navy flannel over a gray t-shirt with his hands in his jeans pockets, and he was accompanied by Olivia in a rust-colored sweater and boots, and they arrived together from the direction of the house and walked through the town square exactly like two people who belonged there, which was, Olivia had decided, the entire point. Dorothy flanked Nathan on the left with the protective energy of a very small general. Roy materialized on his right with Gerald the beagle in his arms. Dana appeared somewhere behind with the expression of someone watching a carefully planned operation unfold. With the journalists who'd stayed in town, there were 2 left, clocked Nathan immediately. But they found, when they tried to approach, that they somehow kept encountering very friendly, very talkative local residents who were extremely interested in sharing the history of the festival, the particulars of the pie competition, and the general qualities of life in Cutler Creek. One of them ended up in a 20-minute conversation with Patty from the diner about the optimal ratio of cinnamon to nutmeg in apple pie filling. The other found Roy, which was statistically the worst possible outcome, and did not escape for half an hour. Nathan, in the meantime, was standing at the pottery stall, same potter, same river clay stoneware, and was having what appeared to be a genuinely interested conversation about wood firing versus electric kilns. He held a bowl in both hands with the careful attention he brought to all handmade things. Olivia appeared at his elbow. "You're doing great," she murmured. "I'm talking about pottery," he said. "You're being a person in a town. That's what great looks like." He looked at her. The festival light was doing unreasonable things to his features, the warm October sun finding the silver in his hair and the particular quality of his expression when he looked at her, which she'd decided was the most distracting thing in her current life. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you said." "Which part?" "The part about running from real things." He looked back at the bowl in his hands, set it carefully down. "I have done that, for a long time, found reasons to keep moving, because moving felt like control." He paused. "Because nothing felt like..." He searched for it, and found it, and said it quietly. "Home." The word fell between them like something settling. Olivia's heart did something she was going to have to sit with later. "Nathan, I want to stay," he said, not with drama, just with the simple, clean certainty of a man who had decided something and was not in the habit of saying things he didn't mean. "Not because the media stops or the situation gets tidier. I want to stay because..." His eyes came to her. "Because of all the things that make it worth wanting to stay." She looked at him in the October festival light with the bluegrass band playing somewhere behind her, and the smell of apple cider donuts in the air, and Dorothy watching them from 3 stalls away with barely concealed delight. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Nathan, you built a tiny home in my backyard by yourself. You planted fennel. You gave me your coffee mug when I had a hard day. You're already staying. She stepped slightly closer. I think what you're actually asking me is something else. He was very still. Yes, he said. Then yes, she said. He looked at her for a moment with an expression that was nothing like the boardroom photograph, nothing like the Forbes profile, nothing like whatever the world had known of him. It was simpler and more essential than all of that. He reached out and took her hand. He did it with the same careful, deliberate quality he brought to everything, like it was something to be done properly or not at all. His hand was warm and steady and real. I should warn you, he said. I'm not good at most of the things normal people do. Like talking? Like talking. Or being social. Or... A very slight, rueful quality entered his voice. Being easy. I teach 4th grade, she said. I specialize in complicated. The smile came. The full one, the same one she'd seen in the rain that morning weeks ago, and it was still a little rusty, and still a little unpracticed, and still absolutely, completely devastating. One of the journalists, who had finally extracted himself from Roy's company, managed to get close enough to get a photograph of Nathan Hale at the Cutler Creek Harvest Festival, holding hands with a woman in a rust-colored sweater at a farmer's market pottery stall, looking like a person who was exactly where he wanted to be. That photograph, when it surfaced online the following Monday, generated more commentary than any photograph taken of Nathan Hale in his entire public career. The comments ranged from, okay, but he looks genuinely happy though, to, she lives in a small town and he lives in her shed. I need this story immediately. A feature piece that ran in a lifestyle publication the following week was titled, The Billionaire Who Chose the Shed, on Wealth, Simplicity, and What We Actually Need. Nathan refused all interview requests. Olivia did too. They had other things to do. Chapter 10. Home was never about the house. The last of the journalists left Cutler Creek on a Sunday in late October, apparently satisfied with the photographs they had and unwilling to endure another encounter with Roy. November came in on a cold, clear morning that turned the last of the maple leaves loose all at once, and Olivia stood in the back garden watching them fall and thought that she had never in her life been quite this happy, in a way that was also a little terrifying, and decided that the terrifying part was probably just her being a person, and was therefore manageable. Nathan was in the shed porch with his coffee when she turned around. Leaves are down, she said. I'll rake them, he said. You don't have to rake my leaves. I live here, he said, with the serene certainty of someone who had made peace with a fact. She looked at him. You do live here. $400 a month, he said, and the completely deadpan quality of his delivery made her put her hand over her mouth to keep from laughing. The most embarrassing rental agreement in the history of Oregon, she agreed. He raked the leaves that afternoon with the focused competence he brought to all physical tasks, while Olivia graded papers on the porch and Dorothy watched over the fence under the pretext of raking her own leaves, which she clearly did not intend to rake. Roy appeared with Gerald and a thermos of hot chocolate, which he distributed with the authority of a man providing a necessary service. Dana came by and sat on the porch steps and watched Nathan rake with an expression of pure, vindicated satisfaction. I am not going to say I told you so, Dana said. You are absolutely going to say it, Olivia said. I told you so, Dana said. Olivia threw a leaf at her. I told that evening, cold and clear. The first really cold evening of the season. The kind that made the stars look harder and brighter than usual. Olivia built a fire in her living room fireplace for the first time since the previous winter. and Nathan appeared at her back door with a bottle of wine and the expression of someone who had something to say and was working up to it. She let him in. Biscuit appeared immediately and stationed himself on Nathan's feet, which was by now standard procedure, and something Nathan had stopped acting surprised by. They sat by the fire. Nathan poured the wine. The logs crackled and shifted. "I've been thinking about what happens next," Nathan said. "Big topic." "I'd like to remain in Cutler Creek," he said. "That's a decision I've made. The shed is still available. Olivia?" He looked at her with patient intensity. "Sorry, go on." "I've spoken to a real estate agent in town. There's a property on the edge of town with some land. I'm considering it." He paused. "But I want to be here. In this—" He gestured, including the house and the yard and what existed between them. "This area of the world. The area of the world containing my shed." "And you," he said, simply. "Primarily you." She looked at the fire for a moment. Then she looked at him. "Are you telling me you're buying a house in my town because of me?" "Yes." "That's a large decision." "I've made larger ones for significantly worse reasons," he said. She thought about $4.6 billion in hotel rooms in cities he had to check his phone to identify. She thought about a man building shelves alone in a backyard shed at midnight because he needed something that was his. "Nathan?" she said. "Yes." "When's the last time you had a place that felt like home?" He was quiet for a moment. She'd learned to wait for his quiet. "My grandmother's house," he said finally. "When I was a child. She had a small house, a garden. She kept it very—" he searched. "Exact. Like she meant it to be there. Like every object was chosen." "That sounds like you," she said. He looked at her. "The shed," she said. "Everything in it. You chose all of it exactly." Something moved through his expression, deep and quiet. "I suppose I did." "I think you've been building home for a long time," she said. "You just kept building it in places you weren't allowed to stay." The fire crackled. Biscuit made a small, self-satisfied noise from the vicinity of Nathan's feet. Outside, the November wind moved through the bare maples with a sound like water. Nathan set his wine glass down. He turned toward her on the couch with the full, deliberate attention he gave to everything important. "I know this has been strange," he said. "The billionaire in the shed situation? Slightly, yes. I know I'm not—" He paused, assembled it. "I'm not someone who comes without complications. There's the money, which I know is—" "I don't care about the money," she said. "I know. Which is—" He stopped. "You have no idea how unusual that is." "I care about the man who washed Roy's casserole dish," she said. "The one who bought a handmade mug and carried it home like it was something worth protecting. Who planted a winter garden and watched a maple tree turn red for 3 minutes and thought nobody was looking. I care about that person." He looked at her. The firelight made everything warm and amber and specific. "That person," he said carefully, "is trying very hard not to be terrible at this." "You're not terrible at it." "I'm—" He made a gesture that encompassed himself. "I have significant room for improvement." "Nathan, you're sitting in my house by a fire in November with a cat on your feet, and you just told me you're staying." She looked at him. "I think you're doing extremely well." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair back from her face with the same gentle deliberateness he brought to everything. Slowly, intentionally, like it was worth doing carefully. "Olivia," he said. "Yes?" "I'd like to be very certain I'm reading this correctly before I—" She kissed him. Because she was a practical person, and because some things didn't need to be processed out loud, and because the moment was right there and perfect, and she was not going to wait for him to work through the grammar of it. He went very still for a fraction of a second. Then he kissed her back. And it was, like everything he did, deliberate and careful and entirely, precisely, unmistakably real. Biscuit remained on his feet throughout. This, Biscuit clearly felt, was the correct development. The fire burned down slowly through the evening while they talked. Really talked, for the first time, about all of it. His family, her grandmother, his company, her school, the things each of them had quietly wanted, that life had taken them past, on the way to something else. He told her about the morning he'd sold the company, standing in a conference room in San Francisco, surrounded by lawyers and advisors, and the correct sense that he had won an enormous game, and feeling nothing but tired. She told him about inheriting the farmhouse, and the shed, and the garden, and deciding to stay in Cutler Creek, even when her life had suggested she might want something larger, and discovering that she'd been right all along. Small is not a limitation, she said. No, he agreed. He was looking at the fire. No, it isn't. Dorothy knocked on the back door at 8:30, which was deeply characteristic of Dorothy. Nathan answered it, which surprised them all, including Dorothy, who held her hand over her heart for a moment. Oh, Dorothy said. You're... She gathered herself. I made too much soup, and I thought... Come in, Dorothy, Nathan said. Dorothy came in. She sat at the kitchen table. Nathan heated the soup. Olivia set out bowls, and Roy appeared at the door approximately 11 minutes later, because Gerald had needed a walk, and Roy had seen Dorothy's lights on, and then Dana materialized because she'd seen Roy's car, and somehow by 9 o'clock, there were 6 people and a cat and a beagle in Olivia's kitchen eating soup on a November evening, and Nathan sat at the head of the kitchen table in a room that was full of noise and warmth and ordinary human chaos. He was not talking much, but he was there, entirely there. Present in the way that was different from the hotel room in an unknown city kind of present. Anchored, specific, his. At one point, Roy asked him, with the directness of a man who had been wondering for months. So, what is it you're planning to do out here? Now that you're... He waved a hand. Staying? Nathan thought about it. Garden, probably, he said. Some projects. Gonna keep living in the shed? I'm looking at a property outside town, with some land. Roy considered this with the gravity of a man who had spent 30 years delivering mail and knew the value of property. The old Hartley place, that might be. Good bones. Needs work. I like work, Nathan said. Roy nodded slowly. Could use some good neighbors out that way, he said. Roy? Olivia said. Just saying, Roy said. But Nathan looked at Roy with something that Olivia recognized as the beginning of genuine warmth. The same way he'd looked at the handmade mug, like he was recognizing something as good. Thank you, Nathan said. For the casserole, both times. Roy looked briefly moved. Anytime, he said gruffly. Later, after everyone had gone home and the kitchen was clean and the fire in the living room had burned down to embers, Nathan stood at Olivia's back door looking out at the yard and the shed with its small porch and the raised beds and the cedar path and the solar panels catching the faint light from the moon. Olivia stood beside him. You know, she said, I should probably feel more concerned that I rented that thing to a stranger for $400, and now he's... She gestured at him, at the yard, at everything. Here. You should probably increase the rent, he said. I really should. You won't, he said. I really won't. He looked at the shed for a long moment. It was a remarkable thing, actually. The small, covered porch, the warm glow through the curtained window, the cedar path through the garden. From the outside, it looked like what it was. A very small, very intentional place that someone had built with care and chosen deliberately. I want to tell you something, he said. She waited. I've built systems used by 400 million people, he said. I've run companies, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. He paused. And the thing that has felt most like an achievement in a long time is this. He gestured at the shed, at the garden, at the yard. This 14 by 12 space in your backyard that I turned into a place I wanted to be? She looked at him. That's either very humble or very telling. Probably both, he said. She put her hand in his. He closed his fingers around it with that same careful warmth. Stay, she said. I'm staying, he said. In the morning, as they always did, the crows came back to the fence. Linda emerged from the shed eave with her characteristic confidence and assessed the yard with the authority of a squirrel who knew she had squatter's rights and intended to exercise them. The raised beds held their winter kale, frost-touched and beautiful. The solar panels caught the first pale Oregon light. The shed porch held its 2 chairs, side by side, with the comfortable permanence of things that belong where they are. Nathan came out of the shed at 6:15, precise as always, with his coffee, and stood on the porch in the gray morning quiet. Olivia opened her back door with her own coffee and crossed the garden path and sat in the other chair. They didn't say anything for a while. They didn't need to. The fog came in low and soft over the yard. The maples were bare now, but still beautiful in their winter honesty. The town of Cutler Creek was waking up around them. 4,000 people doing the quiet, ordinary, irreplaceable things that made a life. And in a backyard on a street 3 blocks from the town square, 2 people sat on a shed porch and drank their coffee and watched the morning come. Later that week, a post appeared on Cutler Creek's community Facebook page. It was from Dorothy. It contained a photograph she had taken from her upstairs window, not with the bird-watching binoculars she wanted everyone to know, but with her phone, which had a very nice camera for a woman her age. The photograph showed 2 chairs on a small porch, 2 coffee cups, a garden in winter, a shed with solar panels and a cedar path and raised beds. Dorothy's caption read, "Our new neighbor, he planted fennel. We've decided to keep him." The post got 47 likes in 2 hours, which was, for Cutler Creek, Oregon, an absolute landslide. Nathan saw it and said nothing but sat with it in the particular way he sat with things that mattered, quietly and without drama and completely. And Olivia, watching him from across the kitchen table with her coffee and biscuit on her lap, and the Oregon morning doing its silver perfect thing outside the window, thought, this is it. This exact thing. This is what home is. Not a property, not a status, not $4.6 billion in a conference room in San Francisco. A shed, a garden, a cat who chose you, a town that decided to keep you, a woman who made you banana bread twice and increased your rent not 1 cent and kissed you before you'd finished working out the sentence. The morning held them like that. The fog moved. The crows called. Linda the squirrel, satisfied that the situation had resolved correctly, went about her business. And Nathan Hale, who had once built something used by 400 million people and felt nothing, sat in a small house in a small town and felt, quietly and exactly and at last, like enough. The end.